So our PLC this Thursday is going to be over standards-based teaching and learning, which we've had the opportunity to learn a little more about at the leadership meetings and through some resources that Miss Lisa sent out. I wanted to share them with you guys because I think that not only will this be useful for grading students, but it also provides a lot of clarity for our classroom teaching, specifically our direct instruction. So I wanted to make this video as something we could all watch beforehand so that we could come ready with questions, concerns, or ideas to make our PLC as meaningful as possible. All right, so the first part that I wanted to cover was planning. It doesn't change too much of our normal unit planning days. However, during unit development and eventually at the end of the year in preparation for next year, when we're making our curriculum maps, we're going to choose priority standards. So before each unit would start, or even at the end of this year going into next year, we would choose which standards are the standards that matter specifically to our grade level, so they're not covered anywhere else, and so the kids wouldn't get it if they didn't get it from us, or material that students can't leave us without mastering. So some standards, although the content may be covered in other grades, it's really important that it's covered in fourth grade or fifth grade specifically. So we choose the priority standards. So for us in fourth grade, inferring, making inferences, and then the elements of a plot, those are both priority standards for us. Because they really need to know those things. A lot of what they do in fifth grade, I believe, is based on their knowledge of those concepts. That's why they're priority standards for us. For those standards, we would create proficiency scales that range from a 1 to a 4. And in those proficiency scales, we describe exactly what the student should be able to do in each part of the scale. So at a 1 on the scale, we'll have our I can statement, our very simplest I can statement. That might include they know background knowledge necessary to master that standard, or things like that. And then for 2, we would have I can statements like they're knowledgeable of the terms that are necessary for that standard. So for the elements of the plot, they're familiar with the term exposition, climax, that kind of thing. A 3 would be that they can master the standard, they can do it. So I have some examples to show too. So for any learning goal, this is like a blanket scale we can keep in our room or use when we don't have anything prepared, almost like a backup plan type deal, but we would apply this ideally to the standard specifically that we're working on. So this one includes a 0. This is new to me and I cannot do this right now. Number 1 would be this looks familiar, but I need help. Number 2 would be I'm not sure if I understand, but I have enough confidence to try. 3 would be you understand and can show it. And 4 would be applying and kind of extending, not necessarily extending to another standard or another grade level, but just taking it deeper and applying it in a more maybe abstract way. Here's an example for RL1. So for a 1 for RL1, I can answer questions about a text by identifying the most important details or examples relating to a question. So that's a level 1 is just pointing to a detail in the text to back up your answer. It's essentially just finding evidence. Number 2 would be explaining what I'm thinking when I read specific words in a text that connect to things I already know. So that's that inferring. Number 3 would be the I can statement for the whole standard. I can use details from the text to explain what the author says or make inferences. The 4 just takes a little bit deeper to forming their own ideas. So when it comes to teaching, that was to wrap it up with the planning. The main thing is just going to be deciding priority standards and creating proficiency scales for our priority standards. Ultimately, when we're planning, we need them to be able to reach a 3 at least to be able to master the NAVI assessments. And the NAVI assessments are rigorous, which means we need to incorporate a lot of truly grade level texts to be sure that students are able to read those. The students that can. Everybody can. Anyway, I'm going to continue. Teaching. So we're going to introduce new content first by providing students with a student-friendly version of the proficiency scale, which means we put it in student terms, maybe using the exact I can statements we would use for that day, and kind of have students decide where they're at, almost like a pretest, but like they're really reflecting on their own knowledge, to help them become more aware of where they're actually at and to have more motivation to get where they want to be. They'll set their own goals. So if they know that they know the words for they're familiar with the terms from the elements of the plot, maybe fifth graders, but they, don't quite know how to take it to that real level of the standard, then they'll know, okay, this, whenever she covers the terms, that'll be a refresher for me, and I really need to hammer down on when we go in deeper with the standard. The majority of students need to reach a certain level before we go on to a new level in our instruction. So being aware of where students are and having data to back that up and show them will be important. And we need to be able to prove it to ourselves that the students are ready before we move on to a lesson covering more rigorous content. Continuing with teaching, we will frequently have students self-assess. Almost, I would think, every other day or so, just kind of looking back at the proficiency scale and seeing if they've gained any new information or knowledge or skills. So for level 1 standard content, for each level of the proficiency scale, there are certain instructional strategies that are encouraged, specifically from a book by Marzano called, I think it's like the Compendium. I'm not even sure if that's a word. Anyway, it's a bunch of teaching strategies. So these are some of the teaching strategies for level 1 content, which would mean like activating background knowledge and learning terms, things like that. So identifying similarities and differences, and that goes in actually a couple different levels. Summarizing and note-taking, reinforcing effort, providing recognition, practiced non-linguistic representation, so having charts, with pictures, things like that. Cooperative learning, setting objectives, generating and testing hypotheses, and cues, questions, and advanced organizers. Some of that stuff I'm not really sure what it is, but basically what I'm getting, what I get from this list, which I found from one of the resources Ms. Lisa sent, is that our direct instruction should be interactive, I think. So yes, we are teaching them, but we are, like, every piece of our direct instruction has a purpose, so that we can make the most of even our level 1 instruction. For level 2 items, those are practicing and deepening lessons. So we'll be comparing and contrasting, examining errors, and doing structured practice sessions. So maybe we're working on one piece at a time, and we're kind of pacing the students ourselves for those level 2 items on the proficiency scale. By level 3, these are knowledge application lessons. So the students are working primarily independently on these to practice applying the knowledge. They're problem solving, they're crafting claims, defending claims, and other independent practice. So once we get to where they're truly supposed to be working towards mastery of the full standard, that should be primarily independent work, which I'm sure this is what a lot of you guys and me and Julie and Kim are already doing, but I think for me it just provided a lot more clarity. And I wasn't like second guessing, because a lot of times I'm like, I don't even know if this is right or if this is going to be good or meaningful. But having this kind of concrete research backed information helps me to know that what I'm doing is right and feel confident whenever I'm teaching that lesson. And when I see student results, I know that I've done what is considered best. Based on research. So I'm not saying anybody's necessarily doing it wrong or that we're even doing it wrong. It's just, this is just some clarifying information. All right, so for grading, this is the not most important, but this is the biggest information that we got, and the biggest change that's coming this year that's going to be across the board is that from 3 to 5 for reading and math, all grades put into PowerSchool are going to be from NAVI assessments. So that's how we decide whether or not a student has mastered the standard. we need to, however, even though that's the only thing that's going in the grade book, we still need to grade. I'm going to say that in air quotes. I should put quotation marks around it. But we're just mainly providing meaningful feedback on the other assessments. So there should be assessment going on daily, whether that's observation of students, whether that's a ticket out the door, or a quick virtual assessment. We should constantly be assessing students to see where they're at with the content that we're teaching so that we know when to move forward with a lesson. So even though our pacing guides and curriculum maps are set, that doesn't mean they're set in stone, because we really shouldn't be moving on with the content that we're teaching until most of the students are with us and ready to move on. And sometimes that lines up with our pacing guide, and sometimes it doesn't. So in order to really maximize the tier 1, like we were studying before we ended school last year, we really need to make sure the students are with us. So for that reason, assessment is necessary on a daily basis. And giving feedback, the meaningful feedback, is the big piece. So on Navi, if you're not familiar, students have 3 tries. There's an assessment with 8 questions. For most of the assessments, it's the same assessment 3 times, so they have 3 times to attempt that assessment. If they get 5 out of 8 or more, they master the standard. If they do not get 5, if they get 4 or fewer out of 8 questions correct, then they've not yet mastered, and we will put IP for that standard in PowerSchool. So when they've mastered it, you put an M. If they've not yet mastered, you put IP. And toward the end of the year is when we will give our 3rd attempts on the Navi assessments. And only after the 3rd attempt will we put DNM on their report card. So there are 3 things that we denote on their report card, whether they've mastered, they're in progress, or they did not master. And the DNM, did not master, only comes at the end of the year. All right, and so that's pretty much all that I have to share. I'm looking forward to some good conversations about all this information coming on at PLC. Specifically, I think we all could have a list of our priority standards for Unit 2 by not this PLC, but the next PLC. And maybe we could each develop a proficiency scale just to make sure we're all, not by this PLC, but by the next one, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And maybe we could help each other through that. And those proficiency skills will be important, because truly that's what determines what we teach. We'll discuss some of the resources that we can use to develop proficiency skills this week on Thursday. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for standards-based learning and standards-based grading. And I hope this was informative and not too confusing. I know I have a tendency to ramble, but I hope this saves us some time at PLC so that we can really have good conversation about the content. Hope y'all have a awesome week. Bye-bye.